My goal is to be the most creative person on YouTube. Now, there's several definitions for creative. One side of it would be the one who creates the most content, and then another side would be the one who has the most unique ideas. So I want to be both. I want to be creating content constantly. This is why, in part, I'm starting this YouTube channel or continuing to make these semi-daily videos. And as well, I want to be have the most creative ideas, the most creative take on all the different styles, right? Now, when I'm learning how to become more creative, I can look to the greatest content creators out there. I can watch every single Mr. Beast video. I can consume content from all the trending creators, and that gives me a source of information on how to be creative. But it's not what to aim at to be the greatest creative on YouTube. So I got to think outside the box. Who are some of the greatest creatives ever in the history of the world? You got Picasso, you got Mozart and Beethoven and Bach. You've got, who knows, David Blaine. Think of like all the people who are super creative, top of their craft, and Taylor Swift, right? She has sold millions of concert tickets because she has an incredible catalog of music, right? You look at the characteristics that each one of them has that makes them so creative. Well, most of the time, it's because they pump out so much content that they're able to have a very small majority of pieces of content that are just the greatest work that they've achieved. And usually that's towards like the middle of their career. But if you want to find all the characteristics, you can't just learn from one person. You got to get information on how this person is creative. So how Picasso painted in a different style than the people in his era. How Bach constructed music out of thin air, like things that people had never heard before, right? How he combined different notes to create tones that were not a thing. These are all different aspects of creativity. Now, I think when you're learning how to become the most creative person, you have to think who is the most creative person, just has all the characteristics of creativity. And I think it's God. I think that God is the most creative person because he created everything out of thin air, out of nothing, right? Whether or not you believe in God or the universe, whatever the epitome of creativity would be, which in my opinion, which I'll phrase or call would be God. Okay, so let's take this example and say, what are the characteristics that make the most creative being? You've got let's hear. They can create in no time whatsoever out of thin air something that is extremely useful, something that can be put to use immediately, something that doesn't have to be prototyped. It's perfect from the start. They do this constantly. They're creating a world that things can exist in. So their content or creations are an ecosystem for other people to live in, right? They empower with their creativity, this person, they empower other people to be creative or to accomplish things. It's universally needed. There's a necessity aspect to it. It's never ending. It's always unique, always fresh. Something that you could never have thought of. These are all the characteristics of God's creativity. And so I want to write down everything. What are all the characteristics of God's creativity? Because in the Bible, it says there is only one God. So we cannot try to convince ourselves that we're God but we can see what characteristics God has and try to be like him. There is a quote, and I should have looked this up before, but in the Bible, it does say to be like him. So to try to carry out, to try to lead a life that's worthy, that's holy, that's all these different things. And part of that, I think, would be being the best that you possibly can be in every pursuit that you do. And part of that would be if I want to become the most creative person, I have to learn from the most creative being. And that is where being like God comes into play. What characteristics of his creativity should I start to strengthen in myself to become the most creative person on YouTube and even the most creative person that this world has ever seen? We'll see. But you start with one and then you get to the next one after. So where do I start now? Well, I can't create out of, I don't want to put a limit on myself. I can create out of thin air, just not with money at this point in time. So what can I create out of thin air? Well, I can create ideas. And so then I can do that and also do it on a consistent basis. So creating content all the time. I can do those two things on this YouTube channel. And so these are two characteristics of creativity that I'm strengthening in doing this YouTube channel. Well, what else makes God's creativity unique? His uniqueness. Everything that he makes is useful and it's something that you've never heard before. And so let's say I take a story from my own experience and then I take out the wisdom from that and then I share that story through a video to you. Well, then you can take value from the story that you've never heard before because it was my personal experience. So it's unique and it's necessary or it's valuable, So long story short, I want to become the most creative person, but maybe you want to become the most honorable or trustworthy, the most innovative, the smartest, whatever it is. Whatever it is that you want to become, ask yourself, what characteristics make God the most blank in this category? Because if God exists and if he's the perfect being, then he is the perfect example for every category of your life because you are a part of him. I don't even know how to describe that. It says we are a part of the church in the Bible, so, I don't know how to even comprehend that. But regardless, if you want to become the best woodworker, then ask yourself what would make God the best woodworker. If you want to become the greatest athlete, how would he be the greatest athlete? Like what characteristics? And for that one, it's pretty easy, being the fastest, the strongest. But maybe once you figure out in that category what makes it the best for athletics, well, if God was the best athlete, he would be well-rounded in every category of life, not just in his athletic abilities. And so then if you ask yourself these questions enough, you start to realize if God was the greatest athlete, not only would he be a good athlete, he'd be a good person in general. Well, then he'd also be a really creative or innovative person. He'd also, be providing value. He'd be a leader. He'd be doing all these different things. And it's like, okay, well, start with becoming a really good athlete, but then just understand that to become the greatest, you have to be just everything. You got to have multiple things going for you all at the same time. So it's nice to know that if you want to be the greatest, you have to have multiple things going for you all at the same time. You start with the one, and then you figure out what are the other things that would make me the greatest. So Kobe is a prime example. He would memorize people's names that he just met and probably would never talk to in his life. And his coach would always ask him, why do you remember these people's names? You saw them last week, you saw them again this week in the gym. There's no point to remember their name if you're never going to see them again after today. And Kobe would say that the vision or the image of Kobe was in the interactions with every person that he met. And so he would say, if I don't remember their name, then what image does that look like on me? But if I do remember their name, how excited will they be? How well will they carry Kobe's name? And so if you want to be Kobe, if you want to be the greatest athlete of all time, or up there, one of the greatest, you have to not only be a good athlete, you have to be an integrity, or you have to have integrity, you have to be well-spoken, you have to be honest and have a good memory and be thoughtful and caring and like all these different characteristics, you know? You have to be like God in all areas of your life if you want to be the greatest. So ask yourself, if you do want to be the greatest, what would the greatest look like? What in this one category are all the perfect qualities that I need to strive for? And then how does that expand to other categories of life? What are the perfect areas in other categories of life that not only can I start strengthening my athletic ability, but I can also start strengthening every other skill that I have? Because it's not just 1 + 1 + 1. It's 1 compounded. So 1 times 10 times 10 times 10, you know? Maybe not times 10, but whatever it is. Hopefully that's a good explanation. I hope that people don't take it as me saying that you should try to be God, because that's not going to happen. But you should try to be like God, without a doubt. Yeah. Why not us?